Hi and welcome to the Digital Accessibility Podcast with me, your host, Joe James. Throughout this series, I will be interviewing professionals who work within the space to share their expertise, journeys and general thoughts on the key issues facing the industry today. My aim is to provide an in-depth look into the world of digital accessibility and the impact it has on the lives of anyone who interacts with digital technology. Our goal is to bridge the skills gap in the current market and inspire others to join the movement towards a more accessible digital world. So whether you're a seasoned professional or just starting out, I hope that this platform will provide you with valuable insights and practical advice from experts and advocates in this extremely important community. Today, on this pilot episode, I'm joined by Jane Abbott, the owner and managing director of PCR Digital. Jane has been my mentor and the reason I've had the opportunity to research and discover the world of digital accessibility. She's mentored me and many others on the practicalities of recruiting specialists within the field and has a true passion for general accessibility, diversity and inclusion. So welcome to the podcast, Jane. I hope that intro does you justice.
It was lovely, thank you.
Brilliant. And congratulations also. We've recently had the accreditation of the woman-led business at PCR Digital, so it's
I
great to see.
know, I feels a little bit like I'm a fraud, but we are women-led, so there you go.
You can't be a fraud, can you?
No.
It's a true thing that's happened, so that's brilliant.
Yeah,
But thank you again, and I guess I've given a little bit of an intro. So obviously you are managing director of PCR Digital, where I work, and the sponsor of the show. Um, but could you share with the listeners a bit more about your background, or I guess leading into your experience of digital accessibility as well?
yeah. So before I was leading PCR, I was just like you, Joe. I was a recruitment consultant, and a lot of the work I did at the time was finding front-end developers for companies like BBC and smaller companies and e-commerce companies. Um, and those front-end developers used a lot of tools. And I can remember the first time I was like, JAWS, what is JAWS? And that was literally the first time that I had to research that tool, ask the people I was talking to, what is it? And even then, when they said it's an accessibility tool, I still didn't really understand it because I'd never heard of accessibility in the digital world. But that was my very first sort of, getting to know what it was, why they used it, who used it. And then one of our contractors became a manager in a company who was setting up a whole accessibility team. And he came to me asking for accessibility experts with front end skills. And I couldn't find any to begin with, but that's how the whole thing started, really.
Amazing. I think I know which company you're talking about, but for legal reasons, we can't mention who they are.
Yeah.
But I mean, huge company, and one of the forerunners, I think, for accessibility with their products and services. So it's amazing that that was the first sort of um, company that you were helping to find these people for, and I'm currently working with them myself, and still a challenge, and
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
probably what 6 7, well, I think it's 10 years ago, wasn't it, we started working with them, so
Over, yeah, I think it's over 11 now, so a long time.
amazing. But amazing to think that it's probably still as hard now to find people with those skills. 10 years in the digital or technological world is a lifetime, the
Mm.
amount of changes, but to think that has that much really changed when it comes to accessibility? Because I think people are still struggling to use services and tools or applications, even hardware. It's funny because before we started recording, we were both talking about wearing our glasses on the call,
Yeah.
and even that is a form of assistive technology.
But I think you think 10 years ago, um, someone might just be using a computer all the time, and then you think how the phones have developed, and then it's endless, isn't it? All the applications that we use and that should be accessible. So the job of accessibility professionals just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah, and it's forever changing, and it's always going to be that way, I think. I don't think there's
Yeah.
ever going to be a full stop at the
No,
end of
no.
the digital world. So it's I guess keeping everyone on their toes at every step of the way.
Yeah,
And I guess it's a big part of it is awareness. Awareness, like you said, when someone said about this accessibility tool, and well, I'm not quite sure what accessibility actually is. And it is a word with quite a few meanings. You could think of that as access to a physical building, or even access to a system without thinking about additional needs, or potentially having impairments or disabilities. So
yeah.
in terms of awareness, have yourself or PCR Digital done anything over the years to help sort of raise awareness for accessibility?
So raising aware, I guess our primary role was to find people with accessibility skills, and because we couldn't find them, we sort of thought, how are we going to do this? What can we do to help our client? So that's when I headed up the London Accessibility Meetup Group and started it. And literally, I think there was like 12 people, and then there were 18 people. And I handed it over after a while, and there's now 3,000 people in that group. But all of those people who are presenting at that meetup was, making everyone who went, and the recordings, making them aware of accessibility and talking more about it. So that forum was really, really good for awareness. But just in terms of, talking to our clients who might not be aware of it, it's something I think when they're asking for those skills and just asking what they're doing about it, some companies are still doing absolutely nothing and not even aware of it, whereas others are and want to do more. So I think it's just in our DNA now because it's so big for us. So we
Yeah.
do talk about it. Yeah.
And that's, yeah, I guess it is just keeping it within conversation, because it shouldn't really be a taboo subject. But I think there are quite a lot of companies that, I mean, we live in a society where we have to be profitable. There has to be a return on our investment, and unfortunately, you can see the likes of, say, Twitter, where the entire accessibility team were pretty much made redundant not too long ago now, and it's not something that I think is a viable thing to do. I don't think that you should, it's a personal opinion, I suppose, that I'm raising there, but
Yeah.
not having a team that's actually helping your platform or your services be used by 100% of the population, you know, instead of 85% of the population. There's 15% of people in the world that have a recognizable disability or impairment of some form. That's not even taking into consideration those of us like you and I that have, what we might see as everyday needs, like
Yeah. Yeah.
wearing reading glasses when you're using a phone, um, or just an aging population. That's
Yeah.
still something to consider. Not that my gran uses Twitter, but I'm sure that as as we get older, we might be using those types of platforms because we've grown up with them.
We
Um,
will, for sure. And that those redundancies, like you say, there's a commercial reason for it at the moment. And in a way, you could think, okay, so everything is accessible at the moment, but 3 months down the line, 6 months, whoever goes back in there, it's going to be a horrible job for them because, and it is an ongoing thing, I think, in the world of sort of digital accessibility, because as soon as anything changes on a website or an app or something, then is it still accessible? Has it been audited? Has it been tested? So it'll cost them more, won't it? Down the line to bring back a team, I guess.
it's exactly that, and I've seen quite a few posts this year alone about the difference in cost as you move along the software development life cycle. So if you're starting to think about accessibility in the design phase before you've actually invested any money on development, um, I think it's 30 times cheaper
Oh,
than
really?
if it's in development stage, because if you've
Mm,
already thought about it, you're not having to refactor any code, you're not having to start from scratch potentially, or implement new things. And then when you get further and further down the line, there's just so much more work you need to do to sort of
yeah,
undo what you've done to put it right. And it does pay to think about things before putting boots on ground and
yeah,
bums in seats, and that's coming from us as recruiters.
yeah,
Um, but I think that it's very interesting, but yeah, maintaining that conversation across the board is always going to be so important, and hopefully that's what this will do. You know, more and more people will understand the needs for this discussion.
Mm.
But I guess it has evolved, and there is more awareness. I personally feel that might be because I'm working in the space and I'm talking to people in that area every day. But have you started to see a bit more out there, sort of on social media and things, or?
I think the public sector is where we're seeing most of the demand, most of the concern. You know, they've got a remit to be helping everyone within, you know, who uses their sites and things. So, you know, the UK population really. So I can see why they're doing it. But I also think some companies who are doing it are they don't need to shout about it. You know, it's just part and parcel of what they're doing because they believe it's right. And you wouldn't necessarily know that they have people, you know, they might not even have an accessibility team, but they might have some really good developers who are implementing it and trying to, you know, be the advocates in the business for it. So it's not always easy to see where it's happening. And it's always nice when you do hear about companies doing it, but I know a lot of companies don't shout about it.
That's true, and I think that you've hit the nail on the head with that comment about there may be some developers or designers or people in the technical teams that are advocates for accessibility for their own reasons, their own personal interests, maybe.
Mm.
Um, but unfortunately, the investment isn't there from those that are making decisions within the company, and that can really affect things further down the line. But also, as talking as a recruiter or someone in the sort of resourcing space, it's not great for retaining good quality staff. I've spoken to countless front end developers who have said if you're a front end engineer or developer and you're not thinking about accessibility, then you can't really be doing the full job, because that's more or less what your job is, isn't it? You know, making sure that what you develop is accessible to people, that and regardless of needs. I know there's more ingrained detail when it comes to additional needs or assistive technologies, but that resonated with me.
But so what's the starting point then, Joe, of accessibility? Because I'm talking about web developers, you're talking about web developers, but actually it's probably the design stage and, you know, really a whole group of people talking about it that makes up the accessibility team, isn't it?
It is, but I also think I mean, it's similar to the information security or cyber security space, because I used to see that as something that is just, you know, you've got a platform and then, right, we need to make sure it's a separate thing. We need to make sure
Mm.
it's secure. But actually, you've got things like DevSecOps instead of DevOps, where it's ingrained within every single part of the software development lifecycle. I think we need that for accessibility, because not only does it just need to be spoken about or thought about at the design phase, through development, you need to understand the nuances of how to actually make something a bit more accessible. Even through testing, you need people that are looking out for the right things, being able to get into the mind of the user who has an
Yeah.
additional need. But not even that, you know, you need to make sure you're including those groups of people, and not just discounting them.
Mm.
I think that's a big part of the problem, is you don't see the barriers, because if you are an able-bodied person with no additional needs, you wouldn't see anything as a particular barrier. You know,
No.
oh well, I can read the text on my screen just fine at that size, so why should I need to amend it? You know,
Yeah.
because they've not had to consider it. So I think it's a from my point of view, I think it is a mindset shift that's
Mm.
needed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that a lot of people are talking about implementing it within university as well, so technical roles and just having it as part of the syllabus, because you need to sort of ingrain it within the full role rather than just an
Yeah, that's
additional.
amazing. Yeah.
So that's, you know, I mean, that would be interesting to see how that goes, and I'm following a few people in the space, so I'm hoping actually to have a lady on and a future episode to talk about that as well, so that would be
That'd
great.
be really interesting. Yeah. See how it's going.
Brilliant. And I did have another question here for you.
Go on
So
then.
I think we've already spoken about this actually. So reading glasses, is a big one for us because we
Yeah,
both use them.
yeah.
But what would you say are some of the common misconceptions about digital accessibility?
I mean, we have really talked about it, haven't we?
Mm.
And you probably know more than I do these days, but it's just that, what just because you're an able-bodied, someone looks like they're absolutely fine, you can't sort of go, well, that's it. There's my husband's got glaucoma. That's another visibility thing. And I know that sometimes when they're training accessibility, they get to wear different glasses and see how different people with different problems see things. But to us, these people might look like you or I, you know so the awareness is a massive great thing that we have to try and understand and share, isn't it? Because that's the whole thing. And you just said it as well, that when sorry, I'm not going to say this very well, but when developers are developing, they have to understand what are all the different things that people might have problems or issues with. So
Yeah. I think
yeah,
compassion as well, isn't it? It's having that sort of empathy for not everyone's going to have the same life experience as you do, and but being able to sort of have that out of body, like
yeah,
this isn't.
yeah,
I'm not just developing for myself. It's thinking about others and um, knowing that everyone's different. There's
yeah.
no such thing as normal,
There isn't, is there?
which is worrying, isn't it? But
Yeah.
all my life I thought I was normal, but maybe I'm not. Um, it's yeah, it's a very fascinating space. And beyond the sort of physical disabilities or impairments that people might have, such as sort of motor or visual or audio impairments, there's also a lot of work in the neurodiversity sort of
Mm,
space as well. So attention deficit disorder, I think that there's so many people out there that have suffered with this for so long that haven't realized. One of the leaders of accessibility at PwC recently announced that he was diagnosed. I won't name him or anything because I don't know if he's put it out there on LinkedIn and things
yeah,
and
yeah,
social media. But after all these years, he's working in the accessibility space, making things better for people with neurodiverse sort of uh, needs. Um, and you know, later on in his sort of career, he's now thought, oh, actually, I'm making things better for myself.
that's amazing. Yeah,
And though that's a very much invisible um, quote unquote disability.
yeah,
Those that have sort of neurodiversities, I think that's the phrase. I'm not sure. It's just, yeah, it is never ending, and a lot of people unfortunately see it as too much like hard work, I think. But
mm,
there, in part of raising awareness, it's also raising the awareness of the positive effects, the return
yeah,
on that investment. Like we've said, 15% of people globally are registered to have a disability. So that's 15% of the market that you may have discounted. So when you
yeah,
include them, hopefully you'll see an increase on the
yeah.
on your sort of revenues. But brilliant. And then, do you have any sort of advice for anyone that's looking at um, getting into this sort of space at all, or um, yeah, just in that sort of area?
I mean, I think the something like the Accessibility Meetup is just great. And there's others now. They're in Glasgow and other cities, aren't they? So
Yeah,
there are a number of those. So if you can get to one of those or see when one is happening, I think it just opens up a whole other world. And also they're a really nice bunch of people,
yeah.
they'll talk and share. But otherwise, I guess, Joe, they should be getting in touch with you.
Well, hopefully
Well, as
that
a recruiter and advising, I think you know the space really well, and I think you've seen the transferable skills and you've seen the jobs and what skills they have. So I think, if you're really wanting to work in that space and you're kind of got digital or tech skills, then it is worth a chat with you to kind of understand what's out there and what's your roles.
definitely. And I like that you've mentioned that as well, that it's having that understanding, and I've only got that through having conversations with people in this space, and that's the reason I've decided to It's very fulfilling. I think the work that the people do that I help find roles in the area is extremely fulfilling. They feel that it's, tech for good. They're actually making a real positive difference to so many people's lives. And you can do that without being in the accessibility space, don't get me wrong. But even for me, it's just having conversations with people that's grown my knowledge of the field, and it's absolutely fascinating to see what can be achieved through technological advancements and just knowledge of and just sharing of experience, I think, because opening your eyes that no two people have the same experience in life,
No.
um, even identical twins. It's just fascinating. I think
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
Um, and you know me, Jane, I'm very inquisitive, so I love to ask a question or two. So,
Definitely.
but brilliant, thank you so much, and for the chat and for everything. So I guess that will be a wrap for this episode, but just want to thank you so much again for this first episode. um, we've got future guests that are lined up and hopefully raring to go, and we'll be discussing a bit more sort of hands-on accessibility. I'm looking forward to sort of discussing their current work and what they're doing in upcoming episodes. But if you are listening and you're looking to build an accessibility team yourself, or take your own career in that sort of direction, then I am here to help. And I've got sort of years of experience and a large network within accessibility, and the resources to help you achieve those goals as well. So don't hesitate to reach out. You can find all of our jobs posted on www.pcrdigital.com. I can be found on LinkedIn or Twitter at PCRJoe, or you can email me at joe.james@pcrdigital.com. But after all of that, thank you again for tuning in. Can't wait to bring you even more expert insights and practical advice in the next episode. And thanks again, Jane.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.